Welcome back to Historical American Girl Read-Alouds. Today we're going to read Chapter 4 in Kirsten's Surprise. But first I want to show you Sorry. This is little Sorry, the doll that Kirsten has been wanting to get out of the trunk that's been stored for them. I learned a lot about the Sorry doll that American Girl made when I was looking for one. There's actually quite a few different versions, like 12 or more different versions of the doll. And that's because when American Girl was first coming out with it in the early years, they actually had the doll handmade by different people around the country. And so they would send these people the kit. And the material was sometimes different. The material for the little shawl was different. The skirt length can be very different. The color of the dress, the pattern of the dress can be very different. The hair, the eyes. So there's a lot of different versions. She's got little red feet here too. So there are people that collect all the different versions of Sorry. But I just wanted one, so I just picked the one that I thought was the cutest. And her hair is braided and then curled up in that kind of Swedish fashion. The back of her hair is braided around in circles. So today in the story, Kirsten doesn't actually get Sorry out of the trunk yet, but I decided it was time for our Sorry to join us. Kirsten is sitting in the Scenes and Settings blizzard setting, and that's because today's story is all about a blizzard. In fact, the title of Chapter 4 is Braving the Blizzard. If you remember, in the last chapter, Kirsten and her dad had been collecting the trunks from town, had put them in their wagon, and were headed back home as it looked like it was starting to snow. Mr. Burkhoff, the store owner, had invited them to stay there because he was thinking it might be a blizzard, but her dad was wanting to get home before the snow set in because who knows how long they'd have to wait if it actually snowed a lot. So off they go into the snow. Chapter 4. As they left Maryville in the loaded sleigh, the snow seemed to fall harder every minute. It stung Kirsten's cheeks until she pulled her shawl up over her nose. Papa urged Blackie faster, but now the horse had the extra weight of the trunks to pull, and the sleigh didn't skim along as it had done before. "Look at that sky," Papa said. "Oh, the weather changed while we waited in the store." When the road turned west toward the farm, Kirsten saw that the sleigh tracks they'd made earlier were filling with snow. The strong wind drove the snow directly into their faces. There was no way to hide from it. "Pull the blanket over your head," Papa told Kirsten. She curled up next to Papa's side and buried her face under his arm. She could hear the thump of Papa's heart and the muffled jingle of the sleigh bells as Blackie trotted along. The next time Kirsten peeked over the edge of the blanket, all she could see was white. Snow swirled up from the fields like spray blown from the tops of waves. Drifts shifted and moved as Blackie stepped along. Papa's beard was filled with snow. His mustache was white with it. His eyes were blue slits under his snow-caked eyebrows. "Where's the road, Papa?" Kirsten asked. "I can't see it. We're following the fence posts. Blackie can find his way, though. He's a smart horse." "Do you think we should go back to Maryville?" "We've already come a long way. I think there's a better chance the horse knows his way to the farm. If we just keep heading west, we'll be all right." But Papa frowned into the fiercely blowing snow. Kirsten was worried too. She'd heard stories about settlers who lost their way in blizzards and walked in circles until they fell down. She'd heard about a boy who froze to death when he got lost between his barn and his house. A snowstorm on the plains was as dangerous as a storm on the ocean. Blackie's harness bells sounded faint and lost. His ears were down, his head low. Papa urged him to keep going, but the horse often stumbled in the moving drifts. Kirsten's feet were so cold she could barely move her toes. Under her feet she felt the stones Mama had heated that morning. The warmth had long since gone out of them. "Toss the stones out of the sleigh," Papa told her. "We should make this load lighter. The trunks are heavier than I remembered." "But we won't leave our trunks in the snow, will we?" Kirsten asked. Papa patted her knee. "No, we won't leave our trunks. This snow will let up soon, you'll see." He slapped the reins against Blackie's back, which was thickly covered with snow. Then there were no more fence posts to follow. They drove along beside a dim shadow that Kirsten knew was the edge of the forest. But Blackie walked more and more slowly. Often Papa had to flick the whip across his back to keep him moving. "He wants to turn his back to the wind," Papa said. "But we have to go straight into the wind if we're going to get back to the farm." "Keep going, Blackie!" Kirsten shouted. Her words seemed to disappear into the snow and wind. All at once, Blackie stopped. He wouldn't move. "Yo!" Papa yelled. "Get up there!" It was no use. The horse wouldn't take a single step. "What's wrong with him?" Kirsten asked. "He loses his footing in the snow, and that frightens him," Papa said. "I'll have to lead him to keep him moving." Papa handed Kirsten the reins, wrapped the blanket tightly around her waist, and climbed down from the sleigh. He stepped through the snowdrifts to Blackie's head and took hold of his bridle. "Come on, Blackie. Come along now." Papa made his voice both gruff and soothing. The horse took one step, stopped, then took another step. The bells jingled again. Kirsten realized she'd been holding her breath. She let out a sigh. Blackie trusted Papa. Now they'd keep going toward home. They went slowly, step by difficult step. Papa climbed through knee-high drifts. Even though he was only a few feet in front of her, Kirsten could hardly see him. He was completely covered with snow. Papa pulled Blackie's bridle, and Kirsten slapped Blackie's flanks with the reins. The snow and cold made Kirsten lightheaded. Sometimes it seemed the sleigh wasn't moving at all. Only the snow seemed to move, like water running in a stream. Then Papa stumbled. He went down on his knees and cried out. Kirsten had never heard Papa cry out in pain before, and the sound was colder than the wind. "Papa!" she shouted. "Papa, are you all right?" She jumped out of the sleigh. The snow came up to her hips, but Kirsten pushed through it to Papa's side. Papa tried to stand, but again he went down into the snow. "What's the matter, Papa?" "Ugh, my knee. I twisted my knee. I can't put my weight on it," he said. His face was very pale, his lips white. There was ice in his mustache. "What can I do?" Kirsten begged him. Nothing, Kirsten. It's up to Blackie now, Papa answered. We can't stop here. We have to reach shelter. He dragged himself back to the sleigh, breathing hard. Kirsten wondered how he would ever get back onto the high front seat. At last, Papa managed to crawl up. Then he reached down to help Kirsten up beside him. But when he snapped the whip over Blackie's back, the horse wouldn't budge. It's no good, Papa said. With no one to lead him, he'll stay right here. Kirsten grabbed Papa's hand. But I can lead Blackie, she said. You stay in the sleigh and I'll walk beside him. Do you think you can walk through this deep snow? I'll try, Papa. Papa brushed the snow off Kirsten's shoulders and tied her shawl more tightly over her nose and mouth. Then he pulled off his sheepskin mittens and put them on her hands. Inside Papa's mittens, the fleece was warm and dry. Kirsten's cold hands felt like rabbits creeping into a snug home. You're a good girl, Kirsten, Papa said. You have heart. Papa had told Mama she had heart when she agreed to come here to America. He told Mama she had heart when she was sick on the ship but didn't lose hope. Kirsten wanted to be as brave as Mama. She pulled herself along Blackie's side. She shook the harness and made the bells sound. Yo! She cried in the biggest voice she could manage. Yo, Blackie, come along! To her surprise, the horse's head came up and followed her. But the going was hard. Kirsten's feet slipped. The drifts were up to her knees, and now her feet were so numb she couldn't even wiggle her toes. Like the horse, she bent her head into the wind and concentrated on just one step. Then the next. Then the next. Snow caked on her lips. Keep going, she told herself. Have heart, Kirsten. But she didn't know where she was going. The whole world was a white, blowing snowdrift, and it would soon be dark. Then how would they ever find the way home? Kirsten tried to imagine their home, the little snug cabin somewhere in this storm. It would be warm there. She imagined Mama making soup for supper. She imagined Lizbeth and Anna waiting to make the St. Lucia's Day surprise. Keep going, Kirsten told herself. She tried to sing a Christmas carol to keep her spirits up, but her lips were so cold she could barely move them. Instead, she began to count the way Miss Winston drilled numbers in school. 1, 2, 3, 4. That was 4 steps closer to home. 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 steps closer to home. Kirsten was glad she'd learned her numbers. Maybe the numbers would keep her moving. 9, 10, 11. She bumped into something. She fell against Blackie's side and looked around. They weren't in the fields near the forest anymore. They were near some rocks. We've come the wrong way, Papa called. The horse has taken us into a valley by the stream. He's lost. Kirsten shielded her eyes from the snow to look. She knew where they were. Blackie hadn't come the wrong way at all. These were the cliffs she'd gone to with Singing Bird, her Indian friend. There was the forked birch tree bent over by the wind. She knew that tree. She'd passed it on her way to the cave where she and Singing Bird had sometimes played. Kirsten struggled back to Papa. She reached up and grabbed his hand. I know where we are, Papa. How can you know where we are, Kirsten? The horse has lost his way. I've been here, Kirsten cried. You've been here? Where are we? Papa asked. We're beside a cliff. There's a tiny cave nearby, Kirsten pointed. Papa looked up at the cliff. How far to the cave? It's only a little way, and there's dry wood inside. We can stay there until the storm is over, Kirsten said. Papa tried to stand, but his leg gave out and he sat down again. Can you take care of Blackie? He asked. Yes, I'm sure I can. Then unharness him from the sleigh and lead him to that clump of birch trees. He'll rest there and be glad of it. Groaning, Papa crawled down from the sleigh. He sat on the snow and pushed himself backwards, inching up the slope toward the opening of the cave. As Papa climbed, Kirsten took Blackie's harness off. It was hard to do in Papa's big mittens, so she pulled one off and held it in her teeth while she worked at the buckle. Blackie followed her a few yards to the shelter of the clump of trees. She tied his reins to the birch tree. He whinnied. Kirsten brushed the snow from his forelock and his face. Good old Blackie. You have heart, do you know that? You're a very brave horse. Then she followed Papa up the path to the cave. Inside, the cave was dry and not very deep. Near the back was a pile of dry sticks and grass and black traces of campfires the Indians had made. Singing Bird had said that they sometimes stayed here when they were hunting. Papa twisted a handful of dry grass, then laid dry sticks over it. He chipped at a piece of stone with his flint until he got sparks. A tiny flame began in the dry grass. Papa blew gently and the sticks caught fire. Kirsten brought a larger branch and laid it by the little fire. First, we must warm up your feet, Kirsten. Take off your boots, Papa said. He leaned against the dry wall of the cave. Kirsten spread the blankets next to Papa, sat down, and loosened her bootlaces. When she got her boots off, Papa began to rub her feet gently with his warm hands. Soon her toes started to tingle. She knew it was a good sign that they hurt. They weren't frozen. Papa took off his own boots now and put a thick log on the fire. When did you come to this cave? He asked her. Because Kirsten didn't want to tell him about Singing Bird and the Indians, she said, I was exploring along the stream and I found it. Did you have permission to be so far from the farm? Papa asked sternly. Kirsten shook her head. No, Papa, I wandered farther than I thought. The ice was melting from Papa's beard, and she saw that he smiled at her. I'm glad that you are a little explorer, Kirsten. I'm glad you found this cave. Do you think you can find your way back to the farm from here? I think so, Papa. Then lie back and rest, Papa said. There's nothing we can do until it stops snowing, and you must be very, very tired. Now that they were resting, Kirsten realized she was hungry. She was too exhausted to climb down the path and get what was left of their lunch from the sleigh. But in her pocket she found the piece of sugar candy Mr. Burkhoff had given her at the general store. The candy was shaped like a Christmas bell. She put it in her mouth and lay down beside Papa. The last thing she knew before she fell into a deep sleep was the taste of cinnamon and sugar on her tongue. Whew. Sure is a good thing that Kirsten knew where they were and knew where that cave was. I have one other thing to show you from Kirsten's American Girl collection, and I thought it would be appropriate to show you during this part of the story since they're trying to warm up in the cave from the blizzard. This was something that pioneer families used to warm their feet. It's called a foot stove. So it's got a wooden casing with a metal box inside. And the box has all kinds of little holes punched into it. And that's so that it can let out some heat and light, because inside they would put coals from the fire. And then they would close the door. The metal wouldn't burn, it would hold the coals. And then they would put that near their feet and put their feet near it to warm up. Mine is in need of a little bit of repairs. The handle keeps coming off, so I have to do some work on that. But the patterns that they put into it are really kind of pretty. They have some heart-shaped patterns. Even though their things were simple, they made them with care and with great decoration. Even the corner pegs that hold it up have turned legs to them. So I'm going to read in Welcome to Kirsten's World today a little bit about Singing Bird, or a little bit about her people. In another one of Kirsten's books, Kirsten meets a little Indian girl about the same age as her from the Dakota tribe that lived in the area of Minnesota and the Dakotas. And so that's where Kirsten found the cave. At this time, relationships between pioneers and Indians could sometimes be very friendly. They might get along and trade and help each other out. Or sometimes it was very dangerous. The white settlers were moving on to the Indians' lands, and so sometimes the tribes and the settlers would fight. So Kirsten's parents must have told her to stay close to the farm and to stay away from Indians, and she had disobeyed them when she met Singing Bird. But in the end, it turned out to be okay. She and Singing Bird became friends, and now she even knows where she is. She knows where this cave is. So the part of this book that I'm going to read to you is called Native American Childhood. Dakota children were adored by their families and given many toys. By Singing Bird's time, they had Ojibwe toys too. The tribes often traded with each other. So the Ojibwe was another tribe, like the Dakotas were a tribe. The Ojibwe lived up in the Minnesota and Wisconsin areas. And once upon a time, we called them Chippewa because the word Ojibwe was misunderstood. So if you ever hear about the Chippewa tribe, it's actually the Ojibwa tribe. Until Dakota children were 6, they were allowed to run and play without worrying about chores. But young children still had lessons to learn. They had to be quiet and still when asked only once. During times of danger, sudden noise or movement threatened the entire tribe. Children also learned that lying brought great dishonor and was punished. Parents rarely hit their children, though. They believed it would harm a child's spirit. Turtle charms. Often new babies were given 2 beaded turtles. They held the baby's umbilical cord, which was a symbol of life. The other was empty to confuse any spirits trying to steal the baby's life. Women strapped cradle boards on their backs like backpacks. The doll in this cradle board came from European traders. The wooden hoop protected the baby's head. The dangling charms kept her entertained. The third mother. Ojibwa believed the first people came from the earth, their first mother. Human mothers were second mothers. Cradle boards were third mothers because they protected babies and held them close. There we have some pictures of some dolls. It says girls made dolls. Girls made doll dresses and moccasins in the style of the tribe. Indian dolls. Grandmothers often made dolls for their granddaughters. They made the dolls without facial features, and then the girls gave the dolls faces and personalities. Household skills. By the time girls were 10, they knew how to cook, sew, tan hides, quill, and bead. One Dakota woman explained, "A girl who helped the grown-ups was much honored." Moccasins. At age 7 or 8, a Dakota girl made her first pair of moccasins. If she gave them to an older brother, he became her protector in exchange. Those particular moccasins are covered with a lot of beads, so these moccasins were worn only for special occasions. Tiny teepees. Dakota girls practiced their homemaking skills by making tiny teepees for their dolls. They had to learn how to put up their giant teepee homes as they traveled to follow the buffalo for food. So as young girls, they practiced with all those teepees. You can see some tiny teepees and some small teepees in the pictures there. The American Girl doll Kaya has a small size teepee that she would have used for her dolls. And then more recently, they came out with an actual size teepee for her to go into. At the top, it says games. When older Dakota children weren't working, they played ball games, ran races, held jumping and shooting contests, and played guessing games indoors. These boys are playing Follow the Leader. Lacrosse. Lacrosse is similar to field hockey, except players throw and catch a ball instead of striking it along the ground. It taught children swiftness and sharpness of the eye. Ring and pin game. In this game, players held the metal pin pointing up and let the deer bones hang down. Then they swung the string and tried to catch the bones on the pin. And toy canoe. Parents thought that if children played with a properly made toy canoe, they would understand how to build a full-sized one someday. So that toy canoe there in the picture is very detailed, made just like the ones that they would have full-size as adults. So that's the end of chapter 4. It was a good thing that they were able to go into the cave and have a campfire to warm their feet because, as Kirsten mentioned, their toes could be frozen and die and drop off. So it was a good thing she was starting to have some feeling in her feet when they were there in the cave with the fire. Hopefully the snowstorm will subside. Hopefully Blackie will be able to find the way home. Hopefully they'll get home by St. Lucia's Day. Now some more important things than just getting the trunk have come into the story. We're hoping they can find their way and be able to survive. Tune in next time to find out what happens to Kirsten and her papa.
Och Siri körde i Baigalens vala, all dunter den linden så gröna. Där fick han se sin dotter under färd i riden så varliga lunden med henne. Och välest med valja nu si, all dunter den linden så gröna. Jag ser min dotter, hon kommer till mig i riden så varliga lunden med henne. Och Siri bränn fem när hon kampen så blå, all dunter den linden så gröna. Där fäder hot vågar ska Sven barmen på i riden så varliga lunden.